Move! These aren't for you! The flight attendant snaps her fingers at the black father and daughter in first class. Conversations halt mid-sentence. A champagne glass freezes halfway to lips. Every head in the premium cabin swivels toward James Taylor and his 10-year-old daughter Lily, who clutches her teddy bear tighter as the flight attendant snatches their boarding passes from James's hand. "I've already shown those twice," James says, his composed voice contrasting the attendant's hostility. She theatrically examines the documents, holding them to the light as if checking for counterfeits. "Sir, we need to verify you're actually supposed to be here," she announces, voice deliberately projecting to the entire cabin. "These seats are very expensive." Lily's eyes fill with tears as nearby passengers stare. A white businessman across the aisle smirks behind his newspaper. "Dad," Lily whispers, "why is she acting like we stole something?" James squeezes his daughter's hand while reaching for his phone with the other. His thumb moves deliberately across the screen, selecting a contact. The call connects. His words are few, precise, devastating. 20 minutes later, the entire flight is canceled. Security escorts the stunned crew off the aircraft as passengers watch in confusion. They had no idea who they were really messing with, or what was about to happen to their careers. The day begins with promise. James and Lily Taylor navigate the bustling terminal, rolling their carry-ons behind them. James wears a comfortable black hoodie over designer jeans, a deliberate choice for the long flight, rather than his usual tailored suits. Lily bounces alongside him, chattering about their visit to her grandparents and the science project waiting at home. "Dad, can we get hot chocolate before boarding?" Lily asks, pointing toward a cafe. "After check-in, sweetie," James responds, steering them toward the premium counter. The airline representative's smile falters when they approach. Her eyes dart between James's casual attire and the reservation on her screen. "First class?" she confirms, eyebrows slightly raised. "Both of you?" "Yes," James responds evenly. "Same as our outbound flight last week." The representative types with unnecessary vigor. "I'll need to verify the payment method used for this booking." James notices a white couple being checked in at the adjacent counter. No payment verification requested. He says nothing, simply slides his platinum card across the counter. "Very well, Mr. Taylor," she says after a pause, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Boarding passes verified. You're all set." During priority boarding, Cassandra, the lead flight attendant, watches James approach the first-class line. Her posture stiffens. She whispers to Daniel, another attendant beside her. "Watch that one," she murmurs, just loud enough for James to catch. "Probably using points or got upgraded somehow." James pretends not to hear, guiding Lily forward. When he presents their boarding passes, Cassandra examines them longer than she did for previous passengers, turning them over to check the back before reluctantly scanning them. "Down the jet bridge, first left into the cabin," she instructs, without the warm welcome extended to others. Inside the plane, flight attendants direct white passengers to their first-class seats, with choreographed courtesy. "Mr. Patterson, 3C is on your right. Your pre-flight champagne will be right out." When James asks where seats 2A and 2B are, Daniel merely points without making eye contact. As they settle into their spacious seats, Lily excitedly explores the amenities. "Dad, look at these cool headphones, and there's a menu." James helps her buckle in, acutely aware of Cassandra watching them from the galley, whispering to another crew member. When pre-departure drinks are served, the attendant skips their row entirely. James raises his hand politely. "Excuse me, we haven't been offered beverages yet." Daniel approaches with visible reluctance. "Boarding passes again, please." James produces them without comment. Daniel checks them against the manifest, then leaves without a word. He returns moments later with 2 orange juices, not the champagne and specialty cocktails offered to other first-class passengers. "Enjoy your complimentary beverages," he says, emphasizing the word complimentary, as if to suggest they don't belong among paying customers. James had flown this airline over 200 times, but something about today felt different and all too familiar. 20 minutes into boarding, Cassandra approaches James and Lily with deliberate steps. Her professional smile doesn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me, sir," she says, voice pitched to carry across the cabin. "I need to verify you're in the correct seats." James maintains his composure, aware of the eyes turning toward them. "Of course," he says, producing their boarding passes for the third time. "Though I've already shown these twice." Cassandra takes the documents, examining them with exaggerated scrutiny. She flips them over, holds them to the light, and checks the seat numbers against her tablet. The performance stretches uncomfortably long. "These first-class seats are very expensive," she emphasizes, the implication hanging in the air. A white businessman across the aisle chuckles quietly behind his newspaper. Lily shrinks in her seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. James notices her discomfort, feels a familiar burn in his chest, the same sensation he's felt countless times before when encountering these subtle indignities. "We're frequent flyers," James explains calmly. "We often travel first class." Cassandra's eyebrows rise a fraction. "Well," she says with a tight smile, "our system sometimes makes mistakes with upgrades. We just need to make sure everyone's where they belong." "We purchased these tickets months ago," James states firmly. "There was no upgrade involved." Cassandra's smile hardens further. She turns and beckons to Daniel, who approaches from the galley. They converse in stage whispers while glancing repeatedly at James and Lily. Daniel steps forward, hand extended. "Sir, I'll need to see your ID as well. It's standard procedure." James glances around the cabin. No other passengers have been asked for identification after boarding. An older white couple across the aisle watches the scene unfold with unconcealed interest. "Is it standard procedure for all passengers or just certain ones?" James asks quietly. Daniel blinks, momentarily thrown off script. "Just when we need to verify." James produces his ID, maintaining steady eye contact. Daniel examines it against the boarding pass multiple times, eventually returning them with a curt nod. "Everything seems to be in order," he says without an apology, turning to leave. "Is something wrong with our tickets, Dad?" Lily whispers, her earlier excitement now completely deflated. "No, sweetheart," James reassures her, though he clearly hears Cassandra muttering to another attendant about people who don't normally fly first class causing problems. James squeezes Lily's hand reassuringly, but notices her shoulders remain tense. She's no longer exploring the seat features or flipping through the entertainment guide. Instead, she sits perfectly still, trying to be invisible. What the flight crew didn't realize was that James wasn't just any passenger, and he'd learned long ago to document everything. As the final boarding call announcement echoes through the cabin, Cassandra returns. This time she brings reinforcement. Michael, the purser, a tall man with a practiced authoritative demeanor. They position themselves directly in the aisle beside James and Lily, creating an unmistakable spectacle. "Sir," Michael begins, his voice deliberately loud enough to draw attention, "we've received concerns about proper ticketing in this section." Conversations pause. Heads turn. The entire first-class cabin becomes an audience to their confrontation. James looks up, meeting Michael's gaze steadily. "What concerns specifically? I've shown my boarding passes to your colleagues 3 times now." Michael glances pointedly at Lily, then back to James. "Perhaps we should step into the galley for a private conversation." "I don't see any need for privacy," James responds, his voice calm but firm. "We've done nothing wrong." Michael's expression hardens. "Sir, I'm trying to handle this discreetly for everyone's benefit." "By creating a spectacle in front of all these passengers?" James gestures subtly to the now silent cabin. "You're the one making a scene," Michael counters, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "This flight won't depart until we resolve this situation." The pressure mounts as passengers check watches and phones. A woman sighs loudly. A businessman mutters about delays. Lily tugs at her father's sleeve, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Dad, are they going to make us leave the plane?" The vulnerability in her voice strikes James like a physical blow. Before he can reassure her, a white woman across the aisle mutters loudly enough to be heard, "Some people just don't know how to cooperate." James feels the familiar weight of public judgment, the carefully orchestrated humiliation designed to make him voluntarily remove himself from a space others believe he doesn't belong in. He's experienced this dance before, in restaurants, in stores, in corporate boardrooms. With deliberate movements, James takes out his phone and begins recording. "What do you think you're doing?" Cassandra immediately objects. "Recording is against airline policy." "Actually," James responds, voice steady, "your airline policy only prohibits recording of safety procedures and crew members performing safety duties. This isn't a safety issue, this is harassment." Michael steps closer, using his height advantage to loom over James. "Sir, if you're unwilling to comply with crew instructions, we might need to take additional measures." The implied threat hangs in the air. Lily is now crying quietly, trying to hide her face. "Dad," she whispers, "I want to go home." James feels a surge of protective anger, quickly contained and channeled into resolve. For his daughter's sake, he decides to temporarily concede the public confrontation. "Fine," he says, stopping the recording. "We'll talk in the galley, but my daughter comes with me. I'm not leaving her alone." Michael nods curtly, gesturing toward the front of the plane. Cassandra leads the way, while Michael follows behind James and Lily, creating the impression of an escort. In the galley, partially hidden from most passengers but still visible to those in the first few rows, Michael demands James's ticket and ID again. "I've shown these multiple times," James notes as he complies. Michael examines them with theatrical thoroughness before suggesting, "There might be a problem with the payment method used for these premium seats." James maintains his dignity despite the obvious discrimination. "Is there a reason my daughter and I have been singled out when no other passengers have faced this level of scrutiny?" Michael and Cassandra exchange glances but offer no direct answer. "Perhaps," Michael suggests with false concern, "you would be more comfortable in economy, where there might be more people like you." The mask slips. The true nature of the confrontation stands revealed in those final words. In that moment, James made a decision, one that would not only change the course of this flight, but potentially transform airline policy forever. Back at their seats, the atmosphere in first class has changed. Other passengers pretend to be absorbed in magazines or devices, but their sidelong glances betray their awareness of the ongoing drama. James helps Lily settle back into her seat, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. "Did we do something wrong, Dad?" Lily asks in a small voice that breaks something fundamental inside James. He looks at his daughter, his brilliant, sensitive child, who deserves to move through the world without constantly being made to feel like an intruder. In this moment, he makes a silent vow. This stops today. Not just for them, but for everyone who's ever been profiled, questioned, and humiliated for daring to occupy spaces others believe they don't belong in. "No, sweetheart," he answers softly. "We did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes people make incorrect assumptions based on how others look." "Because we're black?" Lily asks directly, with the unfiltered clarity of a child. James nods, meeting her gaze honestly. "Yes, but that's their problem, not ours. And it's not okay." With subtle movements, James turns slightly toward the window and takes out his phone. First, he sends a text to his executive assistant. "Facing discrimination on Flight 372. Need immediate intervention. Activate Protocol 4. Then he makes a call, speaking in a low, measured tone that betrays none of the anger simmering beneath his professional demeanor. "Charles, it's James. I need you to contact legal and PR immediately." He speaks in clipped, precise sentences, using industry terminology and reference codes. "Yes, significant stakeholder concern. Board approval threshold has been met. Immediate action required." From the galley, the flight crew watches him suspiciously. Daniel approaches with brisk steps. "Sir, All electronic devices need to be in airplane mode now, he states with thinly veiled satisfaction at catching James breaking a rule. I'm aware of the regulations, James responds without breaking eye contact. I'll be finished momentarily. Daniel hovers uncomfortably, then retreats when James doesn't back down. What the crew doesn't know, what no one on this flight realizes, is that James Taylor isn't just a random passenger in a hoodie traveling with his daughter. He's recently been appointed to the airline's board of directors after his investment firm, Equitable Ventures, acquired a 23% stake in the company. This casual trip was meant to be his incognito assessment of the airline's service quality before his first official board meeting next week. On the phone, James speaks directly to the airline's chief operating officer, describing the situation without emotion or exaggeration. I'm on Flight 372, experiencing a pattern of discriminatory treatment from the crew, he states factually. Multiple instances of profiling, differential treatment, and now explicit suggestions that we don't belong in first class. Yes, my daughter is with me. His voice hardens slightly. She's been crying. He listens briefly, then continues. I expect someone to meet this aircraft immediately. I'm documenting specific violations of company policies 223 and 415 with potential legal exposure under federal transportation anti-discrimination statutes. He pauses. No, I don't want this quietly resolved. My daughter deserves better. Every passenger deserves better. After ending the call, James turns his attention back to Lily, helping her select a movie on the entertainment system. Things will get better soon, he promises, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. How do you know? She asks, still unsettled. Because some problems can be fixed if the right people decide they need fixing, he explains, and today that's happening. As James observes the flight crew now huddled in concerned conversation at the front of the cabin, he notices the businessman who chuckled earlier watching him with newfound curiosity. James turns away, pulling up the airline's anti-discrimination policies on his tablet. Policies he's already thoroughly familiar with, having helped strengthen similar protocols at other companies in his investment portfolio. The flight attendants thought they were dealing with someone they could easily intimidate. They were about to discover how catastrophically wrong they were. The plane remains at the gate well past its scheduled departure time. The cabin grows warm. Passengers shift restlessly in their seats, checking watches and flight apps on their phones. A nervous energy permeates the air. Cassandra's voice comes over the intercom, artificially bright. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor technical delay. We appreciate your patience and expect to be underway shortly. She avoids looking in James's direction as she makes the announcement. Through the windows, ground crew can be seen in unusual patterns of activity around the aircraft. 10 minutes later, Michael approaches James again. His demeanor has undergone a remarkable transformation, the authoritative posture replaced with something closer to nervousness, though he's clearly trying to maintain his professional facade. Mr. Taylor, he begins, voice conspicuously quieter than during their previous interaction. There seems to have been a misunderstanding earlier. James raises an eyebrow but says nothing. We'd like to offer you and your daughter complimentary premium beverages as an apology for any inconvenience, Michael continues, gesturing toward the galley where Cassandra watches with a tight expression. Thank you, but we're fine, James replies evenly. What I would like, however, are the names and employee IDs of everyone involved in our earlier interactions. Michael blinks rapidly, caught off guard. That's not something we typically provide to passengers. It's not a typical request, James agrees, but given what's transpired, I believe it's reasonable. I'm afraid I can't do that, Michael says, regaining some of his earlier authority. Employee privacy protocols prevent. James interrupts by pulling up a document on his tablet. Section 8.3 of your airline's published customer service procedures states that passengers are entitled to crew identification upon request, particularly in situations involving service complaints. Michael's composure falters. I'll need to consult with my supervisor about that. Please do, James says calmly. I'll wait. Through the aircraft windows, James notices unusual activity on the tarmac. Three individuals in management suits and airline credentials are approaching the aircraft with purposeful strides. A ground crew member directs them toward the boarding door with evident deference. Inside the cabin, Cassandra answers a call on the aircraft phone. Her expression transforms from annoyed to alarmed in seconds. She whispers urgently to Michael, whose face drains of color. "What's happening?" Lily asks, noticing the change in atmosphere. "Accountability," James answers simply. Other passengers have begun questioning the delay more vocally. A man in business class calls out, "Are we leaving anytime soon? I have a connection to make." Daniel attempts to distract by launching into the in-flight safety demonstration, despite the aircraft door remaining visibly open, a procedural violation that several passengers immediately notice and comment on. "They can't do the safety briefing with the door open," a woman a few rows back points out loudly. What's really going on here? Lily, recovering somewhat from the earlier upset, watches the unfolding confusion with growing interest. "Is something happening?" she whispers to her father. James allows himself a small, satisfied nod. "Yes," he confirms quietly. "Accountability is happening." The airline had a choice: address the discrimination honestly or attempt a cover-up. They were about to make the wrong choice. The aircraft door reopens with a hydraulic hiss. Conversations halt as all eyes turn toward the entrance. A woman in a sharp charcoal suit boards first, her expression professionally neutral, but her rapid pace betraying urgency. Two men in airline executive credentials follow closely behind. Cassandra and Michael are immediately summoned to the galley. Through the partially drawn curtain, passengers can see intense conversation happening. The woman in the suit gesturing emphatically while Michael repeatedly shakes his head. Cassandra's hands tremble slightly as she points toward James and Lily. After a brief but clearly heated exchange, the woman in the suit approaches James with measured steps. She stops at his row, offering a practiced smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Taylor, I'm Victoria Reynolds, Vice President of Customer Experience," she says, voice pitched low enough to suggest privacy while remaining perfectly audible to nearby passengers. "I understand there's been an incident, and I'd like to personally apologize for any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. James repeats the word carefully, testing its weight. "Perhaps we could speak privately," Victoria suggests, gesturing toward the front of the aircraft. "We have a ground office where we can discuss this matter with more discretion." James shakes his head once. "My daughter and I were humiliated publicly. Any resolution should be equally transparent." Victoria's smile falters momentarily as she recalibrates. "Of course, I understand your position. Let me assure you that what happened was simply a procedural misunderstanding. Our crew members sometimes exercise extra diligence when they see black passengers in first class." James completes her sentence, his voice calm but direct. Victoria blinks rapidly. "That's not at all what Your flight attendant explicitly suggested we might be more comfortable in economy with people like us," James continues. "Your purser questioned our payment method after verifying our tickets multiple times. Your crew bypassed us during pre-flight service until we specifically requested it. These aren't procedural misunderstandings, Ms. Reynolds. This is a pattern of discriminatory behavior." Victoria's expression shifts as she registers his precise articulation and thorough documentation of events, not the angry defensive response she likely anticipated. She glances at his casual attire, then back to his face with new calculation in her eyes. Other passengers have abandoned any pretense of not listening. A woman several rows back stands up, addressing Victoria directly. "I saw the whole thing," she states firmly. "They were treated differently from the moment they boarded. It was appalling." A second passenger, an older man with a British accent, nods in agreement. "Quite right. Blatant discrimination, if you ask me." Victoria's professional mask slips further as she realizes the situation is rapidly escalating beyond containment. She switches tactics, lowering her voice. "Mr. Taylor, we sincerely regret your experience today. We'd like to offer immediate compensation and an upgrade to our next available premium flight to your destination. James holds her gaze steadily. This isn't about compensation. It's about a culture that allowed your staff to profile and humiliate passengers based on race, in front of my 10-year-old daughter. Victoria flinches at his precise, liability-conscious language. One of the executives behind her immediately pulls out his phone, stepping away to make a call with urgent, hushed tones. As the executives scrambled, James knew the next few minutes would determine whether this became a private settlement or a very public reckoning. The standoff continues as more airline personnel board the aircraft. 2 ground crew supervisors, a customer service manager, a security officer in a blazer rather than uniform, corporate security, not airport police. The parade of arrivals only intensifies passenger frustration. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice crackles over the intercom. I apologize for the continued delay. We're experiencing some administrative issues that must be resolved before departure. We appreciate your patience. A collective groan rises from the cabin. A businessman in the 3rd row stands up, demanding loudly, "What's really going on here? We've been sitting for over an hour." Victoria glances anxiously at her phone as it vibrates with an incoming message. Her eyes widen almost imperceptibly as she reads the screen. She looks at James with new recognition, then whispers something to her colleagues that causes one to physically take a step backward. Immediately, the executive's body language transforms, from managing a situation to damage control. Victoria's shoulders straighten as she leans closer to James. "Mr. Taylor," she says, voice now pitched for his ears only. "Our CEO, Robert Stevens, would like to speak with you personally. He's waiting in the terminal." James doesn't react to the name drop. "And how do you propose we proceed?" "We'd like to continue this conversation in our VIP lounge," Victoria explains. "The flight crew is being replaced as we speak, and all passengers will be fully accommodated." As if on cue, Cassandra and Michael are escorted from the aircraft by the corporate security officer. They exit without looking at James, though Cassandra's face is flushed with either anger or embarrassment. Perhaps both. A new flight crew enters, led by a senior purser who immediately begins apologizing to passengers for the delay. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Captain Rivera, and I'll be taking over this flight. We sincerely apologize for the wait. We're experiencing a staffing issue that requires a full crew change. The airline will be providing meal vouchers for everyone while we prepare for departure." James turns to Lily. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" She studies her father's face. "Are we in trouble?" "No," James assures her, squeezing her hand. "But I need to talk with these people about what happened. Would that be okay with you?" Lily nods solemnly. "Will it fix things?" "It's a start," James promises. Victoria interjects gently. "Mr. Taylor, if your daughter would be more comfortable, we can arrange for her to rest in our children's lounge. It has games and—" "My daughter stays with me," James states firmly. "Whatever arrangements you make need to include her comfort as well." Victoria nods quickly. "Of course. We'll make suitable provisions." As the new flight attendants distribute vouchers, passengers begin connecting the dots. The woman who spoke up earlier is filming the crew change on her phone. Another passenger loudly announces, "I'll be filing a formal complaint about the racial profiling I witnessed on this flight." The businessman who had laughed during the earlier confrontation leans across the aisle toward James. "Say, weren't you on that panel at the Urban Investment Conference last month? I thought you looked familiar." James offers a minimal nod as he helps Lily gather her things, not engaging further with the suddenly friendly overture. The other passengers had witnessed harassment of a black father and his daughter. They had no idea they'd just witnessed the beginning of an industry-wide reckoning. The airline's VIP lounge stands empty except for James, Lily, and 4 tense executives. The space has been cleared of other passengers, an unprecedented move that speaks volumes about the situation's severity. Plush leather seats remain unoccupied. Untouched refreshments sit on polished tables. Lily explores a designated children's area where a specially selected flight attendant, hand-picked for her exemplary service record, engages her with games and activities while remaining within James's line of sight. Robert Stevens, the airline's CEO, enters with purposeful strides. He's perfectly groomed in an expensive suit that screams corporate authority, salt and pepper hair precisely cut, tie knotted with mathematical precision. His practiced smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Taylor," Stevens begins, extending his hand. "I want to personally apologize for the unfortunate incident aboard our aircraft today. This kind of experience doesn't reflect our company values or service standards." James shakes the offered hand but remains silent, allowing the uncomfortable pause to stretch. Stevens continues into the vacuum. "We pride ourselves on creating an inclusive environment for all our passengers. What happened today was clearly an isolated incident, and we'll be conducting a thorough—" "Before we continue," James interrupts calmly, "I don't believe we've formally met yet." Stevens blinks, momentarily thrown off his rehearsed script. "I'm Robert Stevens, Chief Executive Officer of Atlantic Airways." "Yes, I know who you are, Robert," James replies. "I'm James Taylor, Managing Partner at Equitable Ventures and your newest board member. Our firm holds 23% of your company's shares." The revelation lands like a thunderclap. Victoria audibly gasps. One executive nearly spills his water. Stevens' face performs a remarkable transformation. Shock, disbelief, and finally the dawning horror of recognition. "You're—" Stevens starts. "The James Taylor scheduled to attend next week's board meeting, yes," James confirms. "I was traveling incognito to experience the airline service firsthand." Silence engulfs the room. The executives exchange panicked glances, now understanding the true magnitude of their crew's mistake. "What I experienced today," James continues, voice measured and calm, "suggests this company has a significant cultural problem that stock reports and customer surveys haven't captured." Stevens recovers quickly, slipping back into crisis management mode. "Mr. Taylor, I assure you this was an isolated incident. These employees will be dealt with immediately and will—" James raises a hand, stopping Stevens mid-sentence. He reaches for his tablet and pulls up a document. "This is a compiled report of discrimination complaints against Atlantic Airways over the past 3 years, James explains, turning the screen toward Stevens. 78 formal complaints alleging racial profiling or discriminatory treatment. 18 specifically mentioning first-class seating issues similar to what my daughter and I experienced today." Stevens' eyes widen as he scans the data. Information pulled together by James's team before Equitable Ventures made their significant investment. "I was willing to believe these were isolated incidents," James states. "Today proved otherwise. I was racially profiled, my daughter was traumatized, and your staff attempted to intimidate us rather than address their biases." Across the room, Lily laughs at something the flight attendant has said. The sound draws everyone's attention momentarily. "I appreciate the attention my daughter is receiving now," James observes, "but the contrast only highlights the problem. Respect shouldn't be contingent on status or who you know. It should be the baseline for how all passengers are treated." Stevens nods rapidly. "Absolutely, Mr. Taylor. We completely agree." "Then you'll understand what happens next," James continues, voice firm but not aggressive. "An independent investigation into discriminatory practices, mandatory training for all customer-facing staff, a comprehensive review of how complaints are handled, particularly those alleging discrimination." He pauses, making eye contact with each executive in turn. "This isn't a request. It's a condition of our firm's continued investment." The executives nod in unison, understanding the power dynamic has completely reversed. James adds a personal note, his professional veneer softening slightly as he glances toward Lily. "My daughter asked me why we were treated differently. No parent should have to explain discrimination to their child in 2025. This ends today, not just for us, but for everyone who flies with you." Stevens, perspiration now visible on his forehead despite the room's comfortable temperature, agrees instantly. "We'll implement everything you've outlined, effective immediately." There's one more requirement, James adds. Today's flight must be canceled entirely. All passengers rebooked on better flights with full compensation. And the airline needs to be transparent about why. A discriminatory incident that you're taking seriously. Stevens pales visibly. The PR implications of admitting transparency is non-negotiable, James interrupts. You can control the narrative by being honest, or social media will control it for you. Several passengers were filming. As if summoned by his words, Victoria's phone chimes with an alert. She checks it, then looks up with alarm. Videos of the incident are already circulating online, she reports. The hashtag had first class while black is trending. Stevens's shoulders slump in defeat. We'll draft a statement immediately. James nods once. I'll review it before release. The flight crew had humiliated the wrong passenger, but James knew this was about something far bigger than personal revenge. The following days unfold with methodical precision. All passengers from the canceled flight receive premium rebookings, substantial compensation packages, and a letter explaining their flight was canceled due to a discriminatory incident that violated company values. The carefully worded communication, personally approved by James, strikes a delicate balance between accountability and forward-looking action. Social media erupts. The airline's name trends for 48 hours straight. Video clips from the flight accumulate millions of views. Comment sections overflow with similar stories from other passengers who have experienced profiling. In a glass-walled conference room at Atlantic Airways headquarters, James leads an emergency board meeting. He stands at the head of the table in a perfectly tailored suit, a stark contrast to his casual travel attire, commanding the room with quiet authority. The videos have been viewed 17 million times, the marketing director reports nervously. Customer sentiment is running 83% negative. An older board member, face flushed with agitation, interrupts. This is precisely why we shouldn't have issued that statement. We've admitted liability. The legal exposure is enormous. James allows the comment to hang in the air momentarily before responding. Atlantic Airways became liable the moment its employees engaged in discriminatory behavior. The question isn't whether we're exposed, it's how we respond to that reality. He taps his tablet, projecting a series of graphs onto the main screen. These are performance metrics for companies that addressed discrimination proactively versus those that attempted cover-ups. The data tells a clear story. Companies that confronted problems directly recovered faster and ultimately outperformed those that opted for denial or minimal acknowledgement. Transparency isn't just ethically right, it's good business, James explains, highlighting examples of companies that lost millions to boycotts and lawsuits after mishandling similar incidents. We have a choice between short-term discomfort and long-term damage. The chief legal officer clears her throat. Mr. Taylor's assessment aligns with our analysis. Courts and social media both punish cover-ups more severely than the original offenses. By meeting's end, James's comprehensive plan receives unanimous approval, a rare consensus driven partly by conviction and partly by the realization that Equitable Ventures' 23% stake gives James significant leverage. The airline's public statement acknowledges the discriminatory treatment without deflection, announces the immediate suspension of involved staff pending investigation, and outlines concrete steps being implemented company-wide. Behind the scenes, James works methodically, insisting the focus remain on systemic issues rather than individual employees. This isn't about creating scapegoats, he explains to the executive team. Firing a few people won't change the culture that enabled their behavior. He brings in diversity consultants he's worked with previously to develop more effective training and reporting mechanisms. The consultants conduct frank interviews with frontline staff, uncovering uncomfortable truths about unofficial practices and unwritten rules. Meanwhile, Cassandra and Michael secure legal representation. Their attorneys file responses claiming they were following unwritten company practices regarding passenger verification, allegations that trigger an expanded investigation. They're claiming this was policy, Not personal prejudice, the airline's general counsel explains during a closed-door meeting. Was it? James asks directly. The resulting silence speaks volumes. Investigators uncover disturbing patterns. Informal tips during crew training about identifying passengers who might not belong in premium cabins. Performance evaluations that rewarded flight attendants for maintaining cabin standards, a euphemism for scrutinizing certain passengers more closely than others. Complaint patterns showing black passengers were 16 times more likely to be questioned about their seating assignments than white passengers. Most damaging of all, the legal team discovers multiple similar incidents buried by middle management before they could reach executive level, a systemic failure to address discrimination that extends far beyond a single flight crew. We have to disclose these findings, James insists during a tense executive committee meeting. Burying them only continues the pattern. Several executives protest vehemently. The liability implications are astronomical, argues the CFO. Shareholders will revolt. I represent 23% of your shareholders, James reminds them calmly. And I'm telling you that hiding evidence of discrimination after discovering it constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty that could be far more costly. Throughout this period, James shields Lily from media attention while maintaining honest conversations about what happened and why it matters. Why do you keep going to those meetings instead of just getting them in trouble? Lily asks one evening as James reviews documents for the next day's sessions. Because getting people in trouble doesn't fix the problem, James explains. Sometimes you need to change the rules, not just punish the people who followed bad rules. Lily considers this thoughtfully. Like when Ms. Peterson changed the playground rules after Tyler kept excluding kids from games? Exactly like that, James confirms, impressed by her insight. And sometimes the people who make the rules don't even realize they're unfair until someone points it out. He uses these moments to teach her about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Lessons that transform an ugly experience into something empowering rather than traumatic. 3 weeks after the incident, James arranges a meeting with passengers from the flight who witnessed the discrimination. The forum, held in a hotel conference room, gives them space to share their perspectives and contribute to solutions. I've flown your airline for 20 years, states an older woman who had spoken up on the plane. What I saw that day made me question everything about your company values. I didn't say anything while it was happening, admits another passenger, voice thick with regret. I kept waiting for someone else to intervene. That's part of the problem, too. James listens intently, incorporating their feedback into the remediation plan. Some remain skeptical about long-term change, while others express cautious optimism about the transparency of the process. Most companies would have sent gift cards and hoped we'd forget about it, observes a business traveler. The fact that you're actually listening might mean something's really changing. By the 6-week mark, Atlantic Airways implements comprehensive reforms, new training protocols developed with anti-bias experts, transparent complaint tracking systems that flag potential discrimination patterns, revised performance metrics that reward inclusive service rather than passenger policing, and an anonymous reporting system for both employees and passengers to identify problematic behaviors without fear of retaliation. Most significantly, James insists on structural accountability, the creation of a permanent board-level ethics committee with direct oversight of discrimination complaints and regular reporting requirements that ensure executive visibility into frontline practices. Systems enable biases to become patterns, James explains during the final planning session. We're changing the system, not just addressing symptoms. As the airline began its painful but necessary transformation, the broader industry watched with growing unease, knowing they could be next. The hearing room feels deliberately sterile. Neutral gray walls, standard office furniture arranged with mathematical precision, no windows, nothing to distract from the proceedings about to unfold. Cassandra and Michael sit on one side of the table, their attorneys flanking them protectively. Across from them, a panel of 5, the airline's head of human resources, chief compliance officer, 2 independent ethics consultants, and James, his presence unexpected by the former flight attendants, who exchanged nervous glances upon his arrival. This isn't a typical disciplinary hearing. At James's insistence, today's proceedings have been structured as a learning opportunity rather than merely punitive. Recording devices capture every word for future training purposes. We're here to understand the events of Flight 372 and the broader context in which they occurred, begins the Chief Compliance Officer. This isn't a criminal proceeding, but the findings will determine appropriate next steps. Cassandra sits ramrod straight, hands clasped tightly before her. I've worked for this airline for 17 years with an exemplary record, she states defensively. I was simply being thorough and following security protocols. Can you elaborate on which specific security protocols you were following? Asks one of the ethics consultants. Cassandra hesitates. Well, it's standard procedure to verify passengers are in their assigned seats. Do you verify all passengers with equal frequency? The consultant presses. Of course, Cassandra responds quickly. Too quickly. The head of HR slides a document across the table. This is a statistical analysis of passenger verification incidents from the past year, drawn from crew reports and passenger complaints. Your name appears connected to 27 verification incidents. 23 involved passengers of color. Color drains from Cassandra's face. Beside her, Michael shifts uncomfortably in his seat. That's coincidental, Cassandra stammers. I don't target specific passengers. The second ethics consultant leans forward. Mr. Patterson, a white passenger seated across from Mr. Taylor, boarded 3 minutes before him. According to the boarding log, you greeted him by name and directed him to his seat without verification. Can you explain the different approach? Michael's attorney intervenes. My client was following informal guidelines that have been part of the airline's culture for years. Flight attendants are evaluated partly on cabin composition management, an unspoken metric about maintaining the right atmosphere in premium cabins. The revelation hangs in the air, damning not just to the individuals but to the organization that enabled them. Who communicated these informal guidelines to you? Asks the compliance officer. Michael hesitates, then names 3 senior managers. They never said it explicitly, but the message was clear. We were supposed to make sure people fit in first class. And how did you determine who fit? James speaks for the first time, his question gentle but direct. Michael meets his gaze, something shifting in his expression. He begins, then stops. After a long moment, he continues with newfound candor. We made assumptions based on appearance, speech, behavior. Things we were taught to notice during training, though it was never in the official materials. Cassandra remains defensive, insisting she was just doing her job and following established practices. When presented with passenger testimonies describing her differential treatment patterns, she struggles to justify the disparities. Perhaps these passengers were more likely to be in the wrong seats, she suggests weakly. The data doesn't support that conclusion, counters the HR director. Seat verification incidents overwhelmingly involved correctly ticketed passengers of color. As the hearing progresses, a clear divide emerges between the 2 flight attendants. Michael gradually acknowledges the biased patterns in his behavior, expressing what appears to be genuine remorse. Cassandra retreats further into justification and deflection. James remains mostly silent, observing the process until the formal questioning concludes. When given the floor, he speaks not with anger, but with measured purpose. This isn't about punishing individuals, he explains, addressing not just Cassandra and Michael, but the entire room, and by extension, through the recordings, the company itself. It's about acknowledging a culture that normalized discrimination and taking concrete steps to change it. He shares stories from other Black executives and frequent flyers who've faced similar treatment, contextualizing this incident within a broader pattern. What happened to my daughter and me wasn't exceptional. It was just exceptionally visible, James continues. The question isn't whether bias exists in your systems. The question is what you'll do now that it's been exposed. The hearing concludes with differentiated outcomes. Cassandra, having shown little recognition of her actions' impact, is offered resignation with partial benefits or transfer to a non-customer-facing role with mandatory training. Michael, whose acknowledgement of bias seems genuine, receives suspension with pay pending completion of an extensive training program, after which he may be reinstated under probation. But the most significant consequence emerges at the organizational level. The investigation exposes how middle management evaluated crew performance based partly on passenger quality control, an unofficial metric that encouraged profiling. 3 senior managers who perpetuated these practices are removed from their positions. Most importantly, the airline establishes an anonymous reporting system for both employees and passengers to flag discriminatory incidents without fear of retaliation, with reports going directly to the board's newly established ethics committee, a structural change that will outlast any individual's employment. What began as one father standing up for his dignity was becoming something neither the airline industry nor James himself had anticipated. 6 months later, Atlantic Airways headquarters buzzes with purposeful energy. The wall-to-wall windows of the executive conference room frame a panoramic view of aircraft taking off and landing, each plane now representing something more than mere transportation. James studies presentation slides displayed on the room's main screen, nodding with measured approval. The quarterly ethics compliance report shows steady improvement. Passenger satisfaction scores up 17% across all demographics, discrimination complaints down 62%, employee engagement metrics at a 5-year high. The numbers confirm what we're seeing operationally, explains Diane Martinez, the newly appointed Chief Inclusion Officer. When we remove the pressure to police who belongs where, our crew members refocused on actual service quality. What about industry response? James asks, turning to the Government Affairs Director. Initially defensive, she responds, but as our metrics improved and received media attention, several competitors began quietly implementing similar programs. What began as crisis management has evolved into competitive advantage. Atlantic Airways now shares anonymized findings and solutions with industry groups, positioning itself as a leader in addressing systemic bias rather than a cautionary tale. 2 major competing airlines have already implemented similar training and reporting systems. Industry publications feature articles about creating truly inclusive premium services. The International Air Transport Association has established a working group specifically focused on anti-discrimination best practices. At an industry conference in Chicago, James takes the stage as keynote speaker. The audience, airline executives, industry regulators, and customer experience professionals, listens with rapt attention as he presents compelling data connecting inclusive practices to business outcomes. The business case is clear, James explains, highlighting graphs showing how addressing discrimination improves customer loyalty, employee retention, and ultimately, profitability. But the human case is even clearer. Every passenger deserves dignity, regardless of appearance, background, or ticket class. The speech resonates beyond transportation circles, clips spreading through business social media as a case study in turning potential disaster into opportunity. Harvard Business Review requests an article expanding on his approach to systemic change in established industries. Meanwhile, Lily channels her experience into positive action. What began as a school assignment documenting microaggressions has evolved into a sophisticated educational project about recognizing and responding to bias. With James's guidance, she develops age-appropriate materials that help children identify unfair treatment without internalizing its harmful messages. My dad says changing rules works better than just getting people in trouble, Lily explains to her class during her presentation. So I made a new rule book for spotting unfair things. Her teacher, recognizing the project's potential, shares it with the district's curriculum coordinator. By semester's end, 3 elementary schools have adopted Lily's framework as part of their social-emotional learning program. Flight attendant unions, initially defensive about the incident, shift their position after James meets with their leadership. Rather than framing reform as punishment for frontline workers, he emphasizes systemic problems requiring systemic solutions. Your members deserve better than being positioned as the enforcers of unwritten discriminatory policies, James tells union representatives during a roundtable discussion. They should be empowered to provide excellent service without the burden of policing who belongs in which cabin. This approach transforms potential adversaries into allies in reform. Together, they develop improved protocols that maintain necessary security while eliminating practices that enable profiling. Most remarkably, Atlantic Airways experiences an unexpected benefit beyond public relations recovery. Customer satisfaction scores rise significantly across all demographics as crew members, freed from implicit bias enforcement, redirect their energy toward genuine hospitality. "We're actually providing better service now," a veteran flight attendant remarks during a training session. "I didn't realize how much mental energy we wasted watching for people who didn't belong until we stopped doing it." The changed policies would affect millions of travelers, but for James, the most important outcome would be measured in a much more personal way. 1 year later, James and Lily approach Atlantic Airways' check-in counter. The terminal bustles with typical airport energy: hurried travelers, emotional reunions, the constant hum of announcements. But for James, this journey carries symbolic weight beyond mere transportation. The check-in agent greets them with genuine warmth. "Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor and Miss Taylor. I see you're in first class to San Francisco today." No double takes, no lingering scrutiny of their reservation. Just professional courtesy extended equally to all premium passengers, the same standard greeting James has observed being given to others in line before them. "Boarding will begin in 45 minutes at Gate B12, the agent continues, returning their identification and boarding passes. "Our premium lounge is located just past security to your right. Enjoy your flight." As they navigate security and approach the gate, James notices subtle but meaningful changes. The boarding announcement explicitly welcomes all premium cabin passengers, regardless of appearance, age, or background, language he helped craft during policy revisions. Settling into their spacious first-class seats, Lily arranges her comfort items with practiced ease. At 12, she carries herself with newfound confidence, observing the world around her with keen awareness.
"Dad,"
she whispers, leaning close.
"Nobody's being treated differently. I've been watching."
James nods, heart swelling with quiet pride, not just in the changes implemented, but in his daughter's emerging sense of justice and observation. The flight's purser, a woman named Rebecca, recognizes James from his now regular board appearances but treats him with the same professional courtesy extended to all passengers. When a brief moment of privacy presents itself, she acknowledges his role with simple dignity. "The changes you helped implement have made our jobs better, Mr. Taylor," she says quietly. "Thank you." James redirects the credit. "The implementation team and frontline staff like yourself did the real work. I just pointed in a direction." Throughout the flight, James observes the cabin crew interacting with a diverse range of passengers. The consistency in service quality, regardless of appearance or background, represents the most meaningful metric of success, more significant than any statistical improvement reported in quarterly meetings. Small but meaningful changes permeate the experience. Crew name badges now include pronouns and language proficiencies. Menu options accommodate various cultural and religious needs without requiring special requests. The in-flight magazine features diverse travelers in its articles and advertisements. Midway through the flight, a passenger from across the aisle approaches James during a quiet moment. With a start, James recognizes him, the businessman who had chuckled during the original confrontation a year earlier. "Mr. Taylor," the man begins awkwardly, "I don't know if you remember me, but I was on that flight last year. I saw what happened and—" I didn't say anything. He hesitates. "I should have spoken up. I've thought about that a lot since then." James studies him thoughtfully before responding. "Growth requires acknowledging past mistakes. Thank you for saying something now." As they prepare for landing, Lily poses a question that cuts to the heart of everything that's transpired. Dad, would this have happened if you weren't on the board? Would they have fixed things if you were just a regular passenger? James considers this thoughtfully. Individual power can create opportunities for change, he explains. But lasting transformation requires collective commitment. One person can open a door, but many need to walk through it together. He gestures subtly toward the diverse crew members working harmoniously throughout the cabin. The most important thing isn't what happened to us. It's what happened for everyone who comes after us. Change isn't about punishment. It's about progress. In the terminal, they pass a prominently displayed passenger Bill of Rights that includes explicit anti-discrimination provisions, a direct result of James's advocacy. Nearby, a diverse group of new flight attendants in training watches their instructor demonstrate customer service techniques that emphasize respect and dignity for all passengers. The foundation of exceptional service isn't about guessing who can afford what, the instructor explains. It's about extending the same dignity to every person who steps aboard. James and Lily continue through the terminal, just two travelers among thousands, but their journey has altered the path for countless others who will never know their names. If you enjoyed this powerful story of justice and transformation, don't miss out on more compelling content like this. Hit that subscribe button right now to join the Beat Stories community. Each week, we bring you authentic, thought-provoking narratives that explore real issues with the respect and depth they deserve. Click the notification bell to be first to know when we post new content. Your support helps us continue creating these important stories that need to be told. Like, comment, and share this video to spread this message of dignity and change. Remember, Beat Stories isn't just about entertainment, it's about making a difference, one story at a time.
Behind every headline is a human story. At Beat Stories, we go deeper, where emotion meets evidence and drama reveals the system. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come.